20 years ago this week, Texas Governor George Walker Bush, son of former President George Herbert Walker Bush, announced that he would be running for the Republican nomination for the then upcoming 2000 United States presidential election. Bush eventually won the nomination in the general election with former United States Secretary of Defense, former Wyoming Congressman, former White House Chief of Staff, and then Halliburton CEO Richard Bruce Dick Cheney, taking his seat as the vice president. These two men would endure extreme highs and extreme lows in terms of their approval ratings among the American public, with Bush being up as high as 90% approval by October 2001 and dipping as low as 22% by January 2009, and Cheney rising to 68% approval by January 2002 and dipping as low as 18% by June 2008. While many works during and after the Bush administration have portrayed the two men in positive and negative lights, perhaps most notably being the many Will Ferrell impersonations on Saturday Night Live, and the Showtime TV movie DC 9/11: A Time of Crisis. In my opinion, though, the only two really relevant works are the 2008 biopic W, directed by Oliver Stone, best known for his work on Platoon, Wall Street, Born on the 4th of July, The Doors, JFK, Natural Born Killers, Nixon, World Trade Center, and most recently Snowden, and the 2018 biopic Vice from director Adam McKay, who rose to prominence in 2015 as a dramatic filmmaker thanks to his film The Big Short, but was previously best known for his comedy films Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Step Brothers, The Other Guys, and Anchorman 2. As their names imply, Stone's biopic focuses mainly on the story of President Bush, while Vice President Cheney is the subject of McKay's film. Bush and Cheney are respectively portrayed by Josh Brolin and Richard Dreyfuss in W, while Vice has them portrayed by Sam Rockwell and Christian Bale, respectively, as well. Both films were mostly liked by critics, but neither met with universal acclaim, though Vice did end up with some awards recognition, and W did not. What's interesting to me about these two films is the time they were made in. When W was released in theaters, it was nearly dusk for the Bush administration, with the election between Senators John McCain of Arizona and Barack Obama of Illinois only a month away, while Vice was released long after the sun had set on Bush's presidency, and not only him, but also President Obama's, with Donald Trump having now been sitting in the big chair for 2 years. There was 10 years of distance between the end of the Bush administration and the release of Vice. There was a lot more to say about what George Bush and Dick Cheney's impact on the world was. Well, W was made in the twilight of the Bush years. We knew some of what had gone on wrong with the world because of these men's actions, but the long-term consequences hadn't set in yet. And since we're on the anniversary of George and Dick's Wicked Adventure, I thought it might be fun to contrast and compare the two films. And before we get started, I want to explain my own perspective on these films, since these are more recent political figures than Lyndon Johnson was when I discussed LBJ and All the Way last year. So, full disclosure, I am a 25-year-old Democrat from Michigan. I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, I voted for Debbie Stabenow and Gretchen Whitmer last year in 2018. That said, up until summer of 2016, I did more or less identify as a conservative. I didn't vote in 2014 because I was a dumbass when I was 20. But I did vote in 2012, and I voted for Mitt Romney. My parents both campaigned for George H.W. in 1992. They campaigned for Bob Dole in 1996. They campaigned for W in 2000. And I vaguely remember being in a hotel ballroom when I was 6, watching my parents and some other people, well, that they knew, watch the election between Bush and Gore. I remember going to a political rally where Dick Cheney spoke with my parents and my little sister back in 2004, and I actually shook Cheney's hand. I remember Bush speaking in Saginaw later that year and being there. And actually, my dad convinced me to start chanting 4 more years, 4 more years, 4 more years. My parents even let me leave school early one day in 2010 so that I could go with them to a Tea Party rally. Take all that info as you will. I just wanted to lay out my own opinions and my own history for transparency's sake. So, that all said, take it away, Pharaoh.
It's time to
Josh Brolin, now very well known to wider audiences for his roles as Cable and Thanos in Deadpool 2 and the last couple Avengers films respectively, plays President Bush in W, while Christian Bale, best known for his portrayal of Batman in Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises, plays Vice President Cheney in Vice. And what's funny to me about both characters is that they both start out as drunk slobs attending Yale, but what's frustrating to me is that W takes its sweet time moving Josh Brolin's Bush from drunk loser to something actually worthwhile. And when we finally see him enter the political sphere, the film doesn't actually focus on how he accomplished anything. It shows him being drunk, but it doesn't show him as an alcoholic. It shows him after he become a born-again Christian, but it doesn't show his actual journey in turning to faith in such an enormous way. It shows him run for governor, but doesn't show him debate Ann Richards one-on-one, who was the incumbent when he ran. It shows him talking to his pastor about running for president, but it doesn't actually show him running. It doesn't show his debates with the late Senator John McCain during the Republican primaries, and it doesn't show him debate Vice President Al Gore in the actual general election. It doesn't show any frustration over Gore's recount effort. It doesn't show his immediate reaction to 9/11. It doesn't show his debates with now former Senator John Kerry. It doesn't show much of anything but his relationship with his father, his relationship with his wife, his campaign for the House of Representatives, and some of the business of getting into Iraq. None of these scenes are bad, mind you, but I would have preferred less focus on George Bush's father issues and more focus on his actual political career. And I don't think this is really any fault of Josh Brolin, who is doing a lot of good work with the material he's given, but the material doesn't have anything for him to really shine in. On the flip side, Bill's Cheney actually has some really interesting meat to chew on. For starters, while Bush is repeatedly talked down to by his father until he finally makes something of himself in W, all Cheney in Vice needs is one stern lecture from his wife before he decides to get his shit together. Instead of spending time with him chasing tail, flunking out of university, and not doing his job at various gigs, the next chronological scene of Cheney is him getting a job in D.C. as Donald Rumsfeld's assistant. And we actually get a really interesting story about this naive newcomer becoming a very savvy political operative. We see him be explained the ins and outs of government by Rumsfeld, like in an early scene where he and Cheney stop outside of Henry Kissinger's office, and Rumsfeld explains that President Nixon is behind the door of that office talking to Kissinger. And Rumsfeld quizzes Cheney on why he'd be talking to Kissinger in their office, but not in the Oval. And Cheney guesses that they're talking about something that he doesn't want on the White House record. And Rumsfeld says that's correct, and explains what's actually being talked about there. The story doesn't stay super long on Cheney's career between being Rumsfeld's intern and being the vice president, but you stay long enough to see Cheney learn and evolve. And as far as the familiar relationships go, I think Cheney has the more interesting story here. Whether you agree with the position or not, the popular view among conservatives is that marriage can only be between one man and one woman. Not two men, not two women. Dick Cheney, of course, is a very prominent voice among the politically conservative, but his youngest daughter, Mary, is a lesbian. And we actually see a scene of her freaking out when her girlfriend breaks up with her in college, which leads to her getting a car accident, and when Dick and his wife Lynn come down to talk to Mary, she tells them what happened, and tells them that she is a gay woman. And what does Dick do? Does he leave and tell her that she's not his daughter? Does he say, "No, sweetie, you're just confused"? No. He gives her a hug and tells her that she's perfect the way she is. And that's more or less true. In real life, Dick Cheney is one of the few voices in conservative politics that says two men and two women can marry each other. But this is also the same man that casually orders to have a man in Iraq be kidnapped by the CIA and squeezed for information while he's just enjoying a donut during the morning briefing. It's a really great contrast between the wholesome family man and the ruthless cutthroat. that we all know from the news. And I think that's what really makes Dick Cheney in Vice a more interesting character than George Bush in W. Bush just sort of wanders into power and never seems like he's really sure of what to do with it, and just lets himself be pulled in whatever direction his cabinet thinks is best. While Cheney actively climbed his way up the ladder, actively sought out power, while again being a wholesome family man who loves his wife and children. We see multiple dynamics to Cheney. We see him act in a different way based on who he's talking to. Well, Bush is basically the same dude no matter who he's talking to, which is probably why he always had a nickname for everyone. He's the fun guy you used to talk to in high school who found himself way in over his head. But Cheney is the mean principal who could make you laugh in spite of yourself. So, the first point goes to Vice. This one is pretty easy to call. While I love Sam Rockwell as Bush in Vice, and I would love to see him continue to portray the 43rd president in another Adam McKay movie, at the end of the day, he's a side character in this movie with a maximum of maybe 8 minutes of screen time. Well, W focuses on Josh Brolin as George Bush, and he has far more material to work with than Rockwell does. Though I will say, there are a few points about Rockwell's Bush that I actually prefer over Brolin's. I've heard some people criticize Adam McKay for the way he wrote Bush, but honestly, I think I appreciate what McKay did more than what Oliver Stone did. When it comes to Bush's use of profanity, Stone almost kind of infantilizes Bush. There's a bit where Brolin as Bush says he's gonna kick Saddam Hussein's sorry motherfucking ass, not sorry motherfucking ass. But by contrast, while Rockwell doesn't make liberal use of profanity, he doesn't walk around the harsher words either. When he first approaches Cheney to be his VP, after winning the Republican primary, Cheney congratulates him, and when Cheney starts to talk about how tiring a political campaign is, he trails off like he's searching for the right word to use. And Rockwell as Bush cuts him off and says that they're, quote, fucking exhausting. Rockwell's Bush doesn't cuss too much, but he doesn't try to skirt around them like a teenager trying not to get in trouble for swearing in front of his parents. Speaking of which, hi Mom, sorry for saying fuck 3 times. Another point that I actually like more about Rockwell's Bush than Brolin's is that while there's only one scene of Rockwell really being a sloppy drunk, while Brolin has one scene as an angry drunk, I actually like Rockwell as a sloppy drunk better as shorthand for Bush's drinking problem. It's Rockwell's first scene in Vice as Bush, and we don't see him again until he's already won the Republican primary. And he mentions while talking to Cheney that he can't drink anymore because it just got really bad for him. Well, Brolin's angry drunk Bush seems less like a guy with a problem and more like a guy who's just had a few too many on one particular night, and then almost did something stupid. We see him still drinking between him showing up at Bush Sr.'s home in D.C. and becoming a born-again Christian in recovery, and he doesn't seem like he has a problem. I believe that Rockwell's Bush needed to quit, but I don't think Brolin's necessarily did. What I do think is that Brolin's Bush probably needed therapy like a fish needs water, which does lead into why I think I have to give him the point, even if I do love Rockwell's take. Brolin is the subject of the film he appears in. He's the lead. His character is made to be far more complex. While I don't care for having so much focus on it, the scenes with Brolin as Bush Jr. and James Cromwell as Bush Sr. really are fantastic. A minor point that I really like is the height difference between the two actors. Josh Brolin is 5'10", Bush Jr. is 6 foot even, Bush Sr. was 6'2", and James Cromwell is 6 foot 6 inches. The massive difference in stature between the two actors really does give you the sense that even as a grown man who's accomplished so much, arguably even more than his father did, Bush Jr. still feels like a child who has to look up to his father. This is especially emphasized with one of the final scenes of the film, where Junior dreams that he's in the Oval Office being lectured by his father all over again. In his mind, no matter what he does, no matter how much he accomplishes, he'll always be stuck in his old man's shadow. And as much as I love Sam Rockwell's Bush, Josh Brolin delivers, and when he does deliver, hot damn does he deliver. Point goes to W. This one is actually easier for me to decide than Bush was. While Richard Dreyfuss's Cheney is more prominent in W than Sam Rockwell's Bush was in Vice, I actually don't like Dreyfuss as a character that much. He doesn't have any of the material that makes Bale's Cheney a compelling Machiavellian figure or a modern Richard III. The subject of Cheney's family isn't mentioned at all for obvious reasons. Dreyfuss's Cheney obviously isn't the focus of W, but even that aside, I don't really like Dreyfuss on the movie's terms either. Well, you can, and many people have and still will argue, that Cheney's actions in real life were horrific. At least Bale's Cheney seems to believe that it was for the greater good. And moreover, at the end of Vice, he actually breaks the fourth wall and argues that not only were his actions necessary, but his actions were what the American people demanded.
You answer me this. What terrorist attack would you have let go forward so you wouldn't seem like a mean and nasty fella? I will not apologize for keeping your family safe. And I will not apologize for doing what needed to be done so that your loved ones can sleep peaceably at night. It has been my honor to be your servant. You chose me, and I did what you asked.
Meanwhile, Dreyfuss doesn't necessarily seem to care about the safety of the American people. His ambition is purely and explicitly just imperialism. Invade Iraq, invade Iran, and we'll have full access to almost all of the oil in the world. We're not here to defend the people of the Middle East from terrorists and tyrants. We're to colonize the damn place. Some people may believe that this was Cheney's true ambition, and I have no evidence to agree or disagree with them. But honestly, just as a character in a movie, I don't think Dick Cheney, the greedy imperialist, is all that interesting. Cheney in Vice is more interesting to me. So, point for Vice. When I first watched W, I walked away thinking I liked Tyler Perry's take on Colin Powell in Vice more than Jeffrey Wright's take in W. And I still think I like Tyler's performance just a little bit more than Jeffrey's, but I think Jeffrey might have actually been written better. Colin Powell is a military man to the core in both films, and subsequently, he knows when a war is a good idea and when a war is a bad idea, and why he could actually give a pass to Afghanistan. But he insists in both films that invading Iraq is the stupidest fucking idea that anyone has ever had, because if you mess with that place, then you destabilize the entire region. And in both films, Powell repeatedly argues this point before being forced into relenting on the issue. But while in Vice, the last we see of Powell is him parroting Cheney and Rumsfeld's BS argument for invading Iraq, in W, we actually have a couple scenes after the invasion. We have a brief scene of him admitting to Cheney that despite his reservations, invading didn't turn out to be such a bad idea, even if he really obviously doesn't like Cheney at all. And then his next scene is him finding out that there were no WMDs in Iraq, the entire reason they invaded the fucking country in the first place. And you can see Jeffrey Wright's face as Colin Powell just contort with fury. He warned them. He warned all of them, and none of them listened. And now they're going to be stuck in this place for decades. It's a really good scene, and I think it's what puts Jeffrey Wright over Perry. Point for W. Also, Mom, sorry for the other two F-bombs. This one is pretty easy. Toby Jones does a perfectly fine job as Karl Rove, but I don't think his impact on the story in W is anywhere near as important as Steve Carell's Donald Rumsfeld is in Vice. Toby Jones as Rove is the person that really pushes Bush to run for office after Bush Sr. loses re-election in 1992. And we see him coach him a little bit when he first runs for governor in 1994, but even then he has a pretty small role, especially compared with Steve Carell as Donald Rumsfeld. And what's great about Rumsfeld is he's kind of a measure for Cheney's character growth. When Cheney first enters Washington, he's a rather meek and sheepish towards Rumsfeld, which Rumsfeld actually likes. And then, when Nixon resigns, Cheney actually recruits Rumsfeld for a new breed of conservatives, namely ones with no connection to Richard Nixon or Watergate. And we have a quick moment where Rumsfeld teases Cheney about his car, and Cheney replies that if he doesn't like it, he could always take the bus, which is a nice little indication that he's grown to the point that he's on Rumsfeld's level. They're equals now. And then we cut to about 30 years later, with Rumsfeld being recruited to be the defense secretary by Cheney. And what's interesting is Rumsfeld is more or less the same as he was in the 70s when he had the same job under Gerald Ford. When he hears all about the various ways Cheney is usurping presidential authority from President Bush, he's actually shocked that his former protege is able to get away with any of this. Then he makes the crack that either Cheney is more ruthless than he was as chief of staff under Ford, or he just hasn't been getting laid, which actually makes the rest of Cheney's staff a little bit uncomfortable. And in turn, Cheney has to take his old mentor aside and explain that things are a little bit more PC nowadays. You can't use emasculating one-liners like that anymore, which leaves Rumsfeld even more stunned. From there, Cheney and Rumsfeld are more or less tied to the hip, but when Iraq happens and the fallout comes in, Bush forces Rumsfeld out. And when Cheney breaks the bad news, Rumsfeld accuses Cheney of being the one who really wants him out. Cheney says he's sorry that this is happening, but Rumsfeld doesn't buy it. Why? Because if he was in Dick's shoes, and Dick was in his, Donald wouldn't feel sorry at all. A lot of people compared Dick Cheney when he was in office to Darth Vader, but in this story, I'd say the better comparison would be Darth Sidious. And in this analogy, Donald Rumsfeld is Darth Plagueis. He taught his apprentice everything he knew, and then his apprentice destroyed him.
Ironic.
Point goes for Vice. Again, this isn't a tough call. While Elizabeth Banks does a pretty good job as Laura Bush, the First Lady just isn't a terribly interesting character. She is a nice lady who tries to support her husband, but won't exactly beat around the bush, when asked for her honest opinion. Not a bad character by any means, but not the most intriguing aspect of the movie she's in. Amy Adams, meanwhile, takes the Lady Macbeth archetype she was given with Lynn Cheney and runs away with it like she's Forrest Gump and no one's told her to stop yet. Her first scene in the movie is easily one of the best scenes of the whole movie, where she tells Christian Bale as Dick that if he doesn't get it together and act like a big boy already, she's leaving him because she has ambitions of her own and she'll never be able to see them fulfilled if she's being held down by a dead weight like Dick is at the start of the movie. And what's great is when Dick has his first heart attack on the campaign trail for Wyoming's only seat in the House of Representatives, Lynn actually gets out there and stumps for her husband for 2 whole weeks. By contrast, Laura, by her own admission, doesn't even share most of her husband's views. When they have their first meet cute in the 70s, George mentions that he's been reading Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater. Laura, in turn, admits she actually voted for LBJ over Goldwater. Yeah, no real contest here. Amy Adams as Lynn Cheney takes this pretty easily. Another point for Vice. This one actually is a little tricky to decide. I think James Cromwell as Bush Sr. has more overall impact on W, but I think Alison Pill's 2 main scenes as Mary Cheney have more weight in Vice. Brolin as Bush Jr. is defined by his father. Every action that he takes is based on something that was either said to him by his father or is defined as something that his father did while president. By contrast, Mary has very little impact on Dick Cheney's actions aside from insisting to Bush Jr. when he accepts his offer to be his running mate that he will not, under any circumstances, speak out against gay marriage, which Jr. completely understands. This is later made to be an enormous hypocrisy, though, when in 2014, Cheney's older daughter Liz is running to primary Senator Mike Enzi in Wyoming and is being crushed in the polls thanks in part to her refusal to come out against gay marriage. Liz more or less says that the only way she can even have a chance against Enzi is if she says she only supports marriage between one man and one woman. And Dick essentially, he tells her she can do it. Then you cut to Alison Pill as Mary Cheney's reaction, and she is absolutely crushed because she thought her family would always support her. And not only did they turn her back on her, they have the gall to act like she's overreacting. And to my knowledge, this bridge is still thoroughly burned in real life. When asked in 2015 if she'd made up with Liz since her primary debate the previous year, Mary replied, "I don't have to answer that." This is really tricky because while Cromwell's character is more relevant to the actual story of W, Alison Pill's performance in her final scene is arguably the best scene in Vice. So you know what? I'm not choosing. Point for both movies. Screw you. The main characters in both films are defined early on by getting a stern talking to by the person they most admire. In Cheney's case, his wife. In Bush's, his father. They both give the main characters the kick in the ass that they need to actually make something of themselves. I adore Amy Adams as an actress. I think her one scene telling Christian Bale as Dick to kick it into gear is more powerful than anything James Cromwell does as Bush Sr., as good as he is in that role. But again, I think Cromwell's role is more central to W than Adams is to Vice. All Bale's Cheney needs is some tough love from his wife, and he's running into the race. While Josh Brolin as Bush Jr. is defined by his father and his legacy. While I do find the motivation of daddy issues to be a rather tedious thing in W, it is more core to that film than Dick's relationship with his wife in Vice. Every scene with Bush Jr. and Sr., or you can all but hear Jr. thinking, "Love me, Dad. Love me. Be proud of me. Notice me, said my father. Notice me." So, I feel pretty confident in handing this one to W again. So, point goes to W. The story of W is that of some rich jerk with a powerful father who tried to become a great man like his father, and ultimately just wound up in the top 15 of most historians' lists of worst American presidents. It's the story of a guy who wanted to do good things for people, but ultimately was torn apart thanks to his own demons and the bad advice of ill-intentioned advisors. The story of Vice, however, is a modern-day Richard III by way of Saturday Night Live-style comedy. It's the story of an average man who rose to become one of the most powerful men in the history of the United States, and what he did when he reached that status. W is definitely more on Bush's side than Vice is on Cheney's, but neither film has that much love for their protagonist. W portrays George Bush as someone who just has no idea what to do about anything beyond daydreaming about baseball. The last scene of the film is Bush imagining himself in the outfield trying to catch a fly ball before the ball disappears somewhere in the air. Vice, however, portrays Dick Cheney as a cutthroat politician who's either a greedy, bloodthirsty hypocrite or a self-righteous hypocrite. The film ends with Cheney having a television interview where Cheney turns to the audience and says,
"I can feel your recriminations and your judgment, and I am fine with it."
Whether you believe that Cheney was well-intentioned or not, you can at least respect him as a character for his refusal to compromise his beliefs. There's only something that Oliver Stone wants to symbolize with the end of W, but I'm really not sure what it's meant to be. I think it's supposed to show that Bush was has so completely lost himself in a position that he was never meant for that he can't even retreat to his happy place. He's so overwhelmed with the weight of his mistakes that he can't simply take refuge in his own imagination. But I'm not 100% sure, honestly. On the flip side, you have Vice, which starts with Cheney as a drunk ne'er-do-well getting busted by a cop for drunk driving. But then it immediately cuts to Cheney as vice president in the Situation Room in D.C. on 9/11. While everyone is either freaking out or trying desperately to not freak out, Dick is eerily calm, either because he's already prepared to defend the country by any means necessary, or because he sees an opportunity to expand executive power, as the narration infers. Oh yeah, I didn't mention. Vice is narrated by a made-up character named Kurt, who is supposed to be the man that Cheney received his heart transplant from. Some people found it annoying, but I actually really enjoy it. And actually, come to think of it, that's actually why I really love Christian Bale as Cheney's fourth wall break at the end of the film. Throughout the story, we've had the author's self-insert character tell us why Dick Cheney is a horrible person. And then at the end, the author allows for Cheney to speak for himself and defend his actions. While W tries to show a sympathetic portrayal of Bush, it doesn't show any of his admirable qualities. It shows him awkwardly attempt to confront wounded soldiers, but it portrays him as too inept to do so effectively. We see that he owns a baseball team, we see that he becomes governor, we see that he's president, but we don't see how he actually came to accomplish any of these things, or what he actually did while in these positions. The closest we see to him doing something is when we see Brolin as Bush debate with Kent Hance, the incumbent congressman from the district in Texas that he was actually running in back in the 70s. And it ends with him being verbally dismantled by the man. And then we cut to about 20 years later with Toby Jones's Karl Rove quizzing Bush on what to say during his debates with Ann Richards. Debates that we don't actually see. This biopic of a politician is surprisingly light on the actual politics. Obviously, there's lots of chatter about Iraq and the infamous axis of evil, but the discussions feel less like the reason the story is being told, and more like they're incidental to the actual story. Vice, on the other hand, is very much involved with the minutiae of politics. It doesn't so much discuss the issues like terrorism, immigration, marriage equality, gender equality, climate change, etc., but it's a discussion of what a particular political office can and cannot do, how to make your way around the specific rules meant to curb your power as a political theory, and it discusses political theory, like the much discussed in film, unitary executive theory. Vice is all about how Cheney became a politician and what he did once he was one. W is about how George Bush tried and ultimately failed to outdo his father. The final point goes to Vice. The score is actually closer than I thought it would be when I first started writing this script. W is a fine movie, but it just doesn't have the same kinetic energy or intrigue as Vice does. But all the same, the score is 4 points for W, 6 points for Vice. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in another comparative review, check out my video from last year where I discussed Rob Reiner's LBJ versus Jay Roach's All the Way. And then drop a comment on either video suggesting what other historical films I can compare and contrast. In the meantime, you can also check out my reviews for Richard Linklater's Last Flag Flying and Ryan Coogler's Fruitvale Station, as well as Zack Snyder's adaptations of 300 and Watchmen, as well as the original Watchmen graphic novel by Alan Moore. Links to all those reviews will be in the description below. I'm going to try to get back into reviewing superhero movies again, but I also want to talk more about movies that don't feature any guys in capes this year. And I've actually had my eyes on a few films I want to tackle before the year ends. All the same, have a great day everyone. Woodstock, out!